This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets. Oil prices fell slightly on Tuesday after a more than $1 slide on Monday amid hopes the US would ease sanctions on producer Venezuela and as Washington stepped up efforts to prevent an escalation of the war between Israel and Hamas. Brent crude futures were down 5 cents at $89.60 a barrel, while US West Texas Intermediate crude, WTI, was down 23 cents at $86.43 a barrel as of 0333 GMT. Venezuela's government and opposition are set to resume long-suspended talks on Tuesday that President Nicolas Maduro said would benefit the upcoming 2024 election, a move that could lead to Washington easing sanctions, multiple sources said.
Venezuela's government and opposition will resume long-suspended talks on Tuesday that President Nicolas Maduro said would benefit the upcoming 2024 election, a move that could lead to Washington easing sanctions, multiple sources said on Monday. The U.S. has long said it would lift some of its sanctions in exchange for democratic concessions from Maduro, but the announcement on Monday offered the first concrete schedule in nearly a year for talks between the government and opposition. President Joe Biden's administration has been shifting toward increasing U.S. engagement with Caracas on issues from energy to immigration to political reform, away from former President Donald Trump's maximum pressure campaign.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Saudi Arabia's crude oil exports in August hit their lowest level in 28 months as they fell for a fifth straight month, data from the Joint Organizations Data Initiative, JODI, showed on Monday. Crude exports from the world's largest oil exporter fell to 5.58 million barrels per day, BPD, down 7.1% from 6.01 million barrels of oil per day in July and the lowest since April 2021. Saudi Arabia and Russia have agreed to combined voluntary oil supply cuts of 1.3 million barrels of oil per day, or more than 1% of global demand, until the end of the year.
EU countries' climate ministers on Monday approved the bloc's negotiating position for this year's UN COP28 climate summit, agreeing to push for a world-first deal to phase out CO2-emitting fossil fuels. The agreement sets up the 27-country European Union to be one of the most ambitious negotiators at the annual United Nations climate talks, where nearly 200 countries negotiate efforts to fight global warming. We will be at the forefront of the negotiations to show the EU's strongest commitment to the green transition and encourage our partners to follow our lead, Spain's Climate Minister Teresa Ribera said.
Next, we have the top news in metal markets.
Copper prices edged lower on Tuesday as the US dollar regained footing ahead of Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's speech this week, while investors remain cautious over the risk of an escalation in the Middle East war on global economy. 3-month copper on the London Metal Exchange was down 0.6% at $7,932.50 per metric ton by 0535 GMT, while the most traded November copper contract on the Shanghai Futures Exchange dipped 0.4% to 66,060 yuan, $9,032.73 per ton. U.S. President Joe Biden will make a high-stakes visit to Israel on Wednesday as the country prepares to escalate an offensive against Hamas militants, while major oil producer Iran warned of preemptive action.
The largest U.S. and EU business federations urged leaders meeting for a summit on Friday to resolve a lingering dispute over Trump-era metals tariffs and increase cooperation on minerals critical to the green transition. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and Business Europe made the call on Monday, before U.S. President Joe Biden hosts European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Charles Michel in Washington. The EU will seek to ward off the return of import tariffs on steel and aluminium imposed by former U.S. President Donald Trump and to agree a deal that benefit EU exporters of critical minerals to the United States. We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector. Russian wheat export prices continued to decline last week, amid reduced demand, analysts said. The price of 12.5% protein Russian wheat scheduled for free onboard FOB delivery in November was $225 per metric ton last week, down $5 from the week before, the IKAR Agriculture Consultancy reported. Demand can only be found at this level, said IKAR head Dmitry Rilko. The Sovcon Agriculture Consultancy sees the price for this class of wheat at $237-241 per ton FOB, down $1 from the week before.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to Trade Flow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at Trade Flow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.